Hey guys, Todd here. Today we're going to install the AMP PowerStep XL running boards on this 2019 Ford Raptor. Now this is a similar installation for other F-150 applications. For this installation, the tools that I will be using are a 10, 11, and 13 millimeter ratcheting wrench, half-inch wrench and socket with ratchet, 4 millimeter and 3/16 Allen wrench, wire strippers, utility knife, and a tape measure. Now make sure you're subscribed to our channel to keep up to date with all our latest content. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, now starting off, I've got the driver's side rail. Now down here towards the rear of the vehicle is gonna have a sticker on there that says driver's side. I'm just gonna go ahead and pull that off, so now we know which side it is. And I'm gonna go ahead and flip this around. And like I said before, this is the rear of the vehicle. So whenever I flip it around, now the rear of the vehicle is over here. But what we're gonna focus on next is this channel that's on the inside of that rail. Okay, now in our kit, we're gonna have some carriage bolts. They're black bolts, look like that. We're gonna take 7 of them and slide them into that channel. Now, as you slide them into the channel, the square at the base of the carriage bolt is gonna be kind of captured inside that rail so that it can't spin. All right, once we get all 7 in, let's go ahead and grab one of our first brackets. All right, now here is our wider bracket. We're just gonna focus on 2 of those carriage bolts for right now. The other 5 carriage bolts have slid down towards the front. We're gonna go ahead and line up these 2 carriage bolts to the bracket. Then we're also gonna take a couple of the serrated flange nuts that are in our kit that are black, and we're gonna get them started onto those carriage bolts. Then we're gonna slide this bracket down to where this edge of the bracket is 9 inches from the end of the opening on the channel. All right, once we're at 9 inches, we're going to go ahead and snug these down. Don't tighten them all the way just yet, just get them nice and snug. We still may need to adjust them later. All right, next we're gonna get one of our silver serrated flange bolts. We're gonna slide it through the bracket into the brace and take one of our other serrated flange nuts and just set it in place right now. We do not wanna tighten this up just yet. Okay, so for our next carriage bolt, what we're gonna do is find one of our light brackets. Now this light bracket, when you hold it the proper way, is gonna create a little bit of a shelf here where it's angled here. You've got a hole that's gonna meet the carriage bolt. Now this shelf is going to sit on top of the shelf on the rail. Make a nice flat surface down there. Take one of our serrated flange nuts, set it on top of there. Yeah, you can snug it down if you want, but still we want to make sure that this can be adjusted side to side before we go on. All right, now let's move on to our next carriage bolt. That's what we're gonna use to attach our center bracket. Now, before I attach that bracket to the bolt, I wanna let you know that this edge of the bracket is gonna need to be 41 inches away from this edge of the first bracket. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure that out. 41 inches puts us right about here. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide the bolt down. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and set this bracket in place. Now let me also point out, we've got a 90-degree angle here. This is what the part of the bracket that's gonna go onto the rail. If you install it upside down, that is incorrect. So make sure you have the shelf on the bracket sitting on top of the shelf on the rail. And then we can go ahead and attach our flange nut. And then we're gonna snug that down. And let me make sure I double check my 41 inches. All right, now for our next carriage bolt, we're going to use our second angled light bracket. Just go ahead and slide that on there. Again, you can snug it up if you want, but we want to make sure that it can be moved side to side to adjust it. All right, now for our final 2 carriage bolts, those are going to be attaching the front bracket. Now this edge of the front bracket needs to be 61¼ inches from that edge of the rear bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that. Move these guys over here. Let me get my 61 1/4. And go ahead and snug that down. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put our other two serrated flange bolts with a serrated flange nut into our brackets, just like we did for the rear bracket. Again, don't tighten these down just yet. Just get them, the threads started. All right, next we can go ahead and set this on the vehicle. Okay, here we are underneath the vehicle. We're on the driver's side all the way up towards the front, just behind the front tire. What you're going to notice, we've got 3 factory studs coming out. Along our rocker panel, there's going to be another 2 sets of 3 factory studs coming out. These are the places that our brackets are going to line up and attach to. Now, I do want to let you know that if you have paint on your factory studs, you want to clear that paint off first before you go any further. That way, the nuts that you put onto those don't create any kind of a bind, because you don't want to break those studs. Next, I also want to let you know that this particular truck is a Raptor, and this is the factory Raptor flare. So on this particular application, the rail is not going to be able to go as far forward as it is on other F-150 applications. So the numbers that I gave you for the dimensions on where the brackets are going to line up is going to be a little bit off on this one, but that's okay. I went ahead and loosened up the bracket so that the bracket can slide back and forth a little bit. I did that on all 3 of the brackets. Now I'm just going to go ahead and lift this up and slide the brackets onto the factory studs. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take from our kit the flange nuts and put them onto the factory studs. This one that I'm working with right here is always the most difficult because we don't have as much room to work with. So I'm doing that one first. And I like to put all the nuts on before I tighten anything down. That way I know I've got everything lined up. We're going to do this to all 3 brackets. Once we've got all of our brackets in place, go ahead and tighten them down with a 13 millimeter. All right, now that we've got all of our brackets tightened down, we're going to focus on our rail. Go ahead and slide that forward because this is not completely tightened down yet. So we're going to slide that forward until this edge is almost touching our flare. If this is a regular F-150 application, just bring it in to where the back bracket is 9 inches from the end, just like we started with. Once that's in place, we're going to go ahead and tighten down our brackets using a 1/2 inch. And then we can tighten down these brackets up top using a 1/2 inch on each side. All right, now that we're back at the table, I want to show you how to assemble your motor linkage. So typically you want to have this fully extended whenever you put this together, but because we have the truck up on the lift and I don't want this to hit the lift arm, I'm actually going to retract it just a little bit. This is the dust cover. Now this fell off when I was pulling the tape off, the packaging tape. If it falls off, it's no big deal. This little tab right here locks into here and then lines up with those 3 holes. Then we're going to take our motor. The motor is going to be facing upward. That's going to lock into the gears, and you might have to adjust the linkage arm a little bit so the holes on here will line up to the holes in the linkage assembly. Then we're going to take our bolts with washers that are included in a kit. They're actually packaged with the motor. We're going to get those started in those holes. Once all 3 are started, we can go ahead and tighten them down with a 4 millimeter Allen wrench. Okay, we're back underneath the truck up at the front bracket just behind the front tire. I'm going to go ahead and lift up the motor linkage. This is where this attaches. I want to call out what's going to line up to what. So these 2 holes right here are going to slide over top of this shelf and line up to these holes. And this hole right here that's threaded is going to line up to this hole in the bracket. So once those are in place, in the bottom we're going to have some bolts out of our kit that will thread into the linkage arm. All right, next we can go ahead and raise this up to where these are going to start to line up. We're going to have a spacer that goes in between those 2. And then we've got a smaller bolt out of our kit that's going to go through that spacer. And then we're going to raise up the bracket to line up to those threaded holes. Now this, we can go ahead and tighten down with a 10mm. Once we're done tightening this down with a 10mm, then we can tighten these with a 13. And next we can do the exact same to the rear linkage. That one, of course, is not going to have the motor. Okay, I've already gone ahead and set the board on top of the linkage arm in the front and in the back. I'm in the rear right now. The front is being stabilized because the motor, the gearing is locked in place. So I want to show you how all this works. Now I've got the board centered in the rail. Now we've got this aluminum block that slides back and forth inside the board. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift that up and I'm going to slide that aluminum block to where you can look up into here and see the holes in the aluminum block. It's going to line up, and then we're going to take some bolts out of our kit, run them into the aluminum block, and tighten them down with a 3/16 Allen wrench. Everything I'm doing here, we'll be doing on the front bracket as well. Okay, so we're underneath the hood right over top of our battery. Now with these two attachment blocks, what we're going to do is take our control module. This only goes on one way, so if it's not fitting on properly, turn around and go the opposite direction. And plug in both sides. Now your negative is going to go to your negative terminal on your battery with a 10mm, and the positive to the positive terminal on the battery with a 13. I've also got the fuse pulled out and set to the side. All right, now we're going to have two sides of our harness coming out. We're going to have a short side and a long side. The short side we're going to run down along the wheel well, down along the frame. The long side we're going to route along the top of the firewall and down the driver's side wheel well and then along the frame. Okay, we're back up underneath the truck on the driver's side. I've got the harness loosely run along the frame. And now I'm going to go ahead and take and plug it into my motor. And now we can go and focus on our lights. Okay, so now for our light kit, I'm going to show you how to do this one. All the rest of them go the exact same way. Now, I've already wiped down this surface right here with isopropyl rubbing alcohol. You want to do that too. That allows us to get a good bond with our 3M adhesive. So what we're going to do, there's actually a hole underneath this bracket. We're going to run our wires up through there. And we're going to turn that around. Go ahead and peel away the adhesive protector. And then we're going to bring that up and set it in place. Push down with some really good pressure. That's a pressure sensitive adhesive, so the pressure causes the adhesive to bond real well. All right, once that's in place, we can go ahead and focus on wiring everything up. So these right here are already kind of pre-stripped. So what we're going to do is strip a little bit of wire off of these. Pull out a 1/4 inch of insulation off of each one. All right, next we want to go ahead and make sure that's twisted so we don't have any burrs or wires hanging off. I like to go ahead and attach these first. So in your kit, you're also going to have some heat shrink butt connectors. We're just going to slide that over top and crimp that in place. next we can go ahead and pull the insulation off of these ends here. I like to also give them a good twist to make sure that I don't have any burrs or pieces of wire hanging off. And then we're going to go ahead and connect black to black and red to red and crimp those down as well. All right. Once we pull that out, we can go ahead and take a heat gun and shrink all that down. Okay, now back over here on the driver's side, right next to our motor linkage, when we look up into the rocker panel, we're going to see a small rubber grommet that's in here. What we're going to do is we're going to make a hole in that rubber grommet. I'm just going to use a utility knife and make a little opening there. Next, what I'm going to do on our harness, and this is only on the driver's side, we've got a couple of trigger wires. They're purple trigger wires. What we're going to do is we're going to fish them up into that grommet. Now I'm going to push, and it's probably not going to go super far, but that's okay. We're pushing up underneath our carpet in the vehicle right now. But I'm just going to kind of push that up in there. And then we can go ahead and tighten up everything as far as our brackets. We're going to line these up where they need to be and tighten this down with a 1/2 inch. Do that with all of our brackets, and then also tie our harness out of the way. Okay, now we are actually inside the truck on the driver's side at the front seat. Now we're going to see we've got a sill plate that's going right across here. What we're going to do, dig our fingers underneath there, then we're going to pop that loose. It just pops right up. Make sure you work it kind of slow. We don't want to break any pegs. We're going to set this off to the side. And now we can go ahead and take our carpet and kind of peel that back. And here are the 2 purple trigger wires that we pulled up through that grommet. So we're going to go ahead and pull all the slack out of that. We're going to run those trigger wires up along here, put our carpet back. And now I like to go ahead and get the carpet set back in place and put the sill back on. Okay, so here are our trigger wires. One thing I want to point out is that one of the trigger wires has a black stripe going through it, the other one does not. So keep that in mind when we're going forward. What we're going to do is first strip a little bit off of each one of the trigger wires. All right, next we're going to go ahead and make sure we don't have any burrs hanging off of them. We're going to use some posi tap connectors that we have in our kit. What you do is you take that apart by unscrewing it. You slide this over top where we can see we've got the wire coming through. And we're going to kind of rough up that wire a little bit. And then take our posi tap and bear down into that and then screw it back on. And what that does, that makes a good connection to that wire. We're going to do the same on this one here. We're also going to have an OBD II connector. This is going to connect to your OBD II port underneath your dash. We'll get to that in a minute. We've got one purple wire here. It's got a black stripe, and one purple wire that does not have a black stripe. So we're going to connect the purple wire with black stripe to our trigger wire that is a purple wire with black stripe. And this just goes on the exact same way. And purple wire, no black stripe, to purple wire, no black stripe. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to plug this into our OBD II port. Okay, now I'm going to show you a little bit extra hardware than what most people are going to see. Now, this particular truck owner is going to be using a monitor to see what's going on with his engine that's going to plug into his OBD II port and run full time. OBD II stands for Onboard Diagnostics 2, which means it's a second iteration. This is a standard that's on all vehicles sold in the US from 1996 on. And this is what the port looks like. Now, I've got this dismounted from the factory mounting system, and AMP Research has decided they were going to make a pass-through, OBD II pass-through. So I've actually got this mounted up. This is going to take the place of this one. And then this end of the AMP Research pass-through is going to plug into the factory port. Once that's plugged in, I can now take my AMP Research OBD II plug-in and plug it in right here. Then I can pull all this stuff up out of the way and wire tie it and secure it to where it doesn't interfere with my pedals. Okay, now we're going to get back up underneath the hood and replace the fuse. Once we put the fuse in, we can go ahead and test the operation. Okay, now if you open the doors and the step retracts, close the door and the step deploys, there's a quick fix for that. Just go back to your trigger wires and swap those around. That concludes the installation. If you found this video helpful, make sure and give us a thumbs up. If you want to know more about the product, check the link in the description below. And as always, if you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online.